Good evening. How are you? Well, I'm doing my stand-in talk from my home office because, frankly, we got here after dark and it's like 20 something degrees outside. and I and I could put it on, but after driving, and I don't like driving that much, this is the best I can do. I'm sorry I haven't been with you the last couple of days, but I've been with Holly. We've been celebrating her birthday. And for us, that's a special thing because a few years ago we were very concerned when she had her double lung transplant exactly what that would mean. And so, yes, we were having fun, and I had a few surprises, but I asked her enough questions to get her something that I thought she'd like to do. And we both share a love of Edgar Allan Poe. And so there's a marvelous house in Richmond, and it's very well done up in old antiques and period pieces to give you the feeling of going back in history. And it's most important for the place where there was an expanded garden, now diminished, that Edgar Allan Poe wooed the woman that he loved. And the family stopped that in the tracks because the father did not trust Poe. And when 20 years later they were engaged to be married, only a few days after that, Edgar Allan Poe died. And that's a mystery in itself. Why did he die? Now, as a kid, I was, as a kid, high school and college, I was at Fordham. And along Fordham Road, there was a place that had a Poe cottage. And apparently, Poe did live there. And I confirmed today from the person who's in charge of the Poe House in Richmond that a story we told each other was true. On the Fordham University campus, within earshot of Poe's cottage, there was a church. And Poe was continuously distracted by the ringing and the clanging of the bell, the tintinnabulation of the bells, 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 which is his poem. I think it's called Bells. And it's because they aggravated him so much and he couldn't focus. And apparently the bells from the chapel disturbed him. Now, people who went to Fordham know about the place in part because to get to Jan's Ice Cream Parlor, Jahn apostrophe S, you had to pass Poe's cottage, essentially Poe's cottage on a triangular space of earth. Anyhow, to get back to why Holly and I were interested in this, it is because it's a story of romance, and Poe's frustration is itself a great story, and you can write it as a tragedy or not. Given the mystery of his final days, it's closer to tragic than the classical comedic ending, which is that the prime actor in the drama succeeds. When he fails, it's a tragedy, and he always has a fatal flaw. Not necessarily a fatal flaw, but a flaw that makes him human and interesting. And Poe was abandoned early on and taken over and had a stepfather who never claimed him and never let him take his name. Thus, Edgar Allan is the name of that family, and they were very comfortable. So, his story is a great one, and it's one that any one of us could follow and find characteristics that informed our own experience. So that's part of it. Now, the writings of Poe toward the women of his love are extraordinary, of course. And he would just shake his arm and couplets would fall out of his shirt or his jacket, which is true. And he spent a long time as an editor, and I have some pictures that I may share with you with this stand and talk. The closest thing I can think of today that parallels some of what I'm talking about is what Jimmy Carter said of his wife at the service for her. He's 99, she died at 96, and both have been through a lot, and they've been together forever. And he said that she gave him advice and guidance and encouragement when he needed it. And he said as long as Rosalind was in the world, he always knew somebody loved and supported him. You can't ask for more than that. Now, visibly watching what those two must have gone through, leaning against each other, and with the help of friends and family, I'm sure, how they supported each other. And the thinking of that was in my mind today because I've talked to husbands or wives and couples and marriages over the last several years. And the interesting question you ask yourself, like when Holly's double lung transplant, first of all, I said, well, maybe you'll outlive the problem with your lungs. And it was clear that was not going to happen. But the operation was dramatic and more than either one of us appreciated. And Holly at one point said, if they told you what this operation was all about, you'd never do it. But it's a test of reason to do it because the alternative is sooner than a working transplant, you would face death's door. And for my own self, I had to ask myself the question a lot of other people do, and that is, can you stay the course? In sickness and in health. And in sickness is a big question. And sometimes, depending on your parents, you get an opportunity to test that, to get the fiber that's necessary. And there is fiber necessary. And the thing that any of you who have been through this will understand, and those who haven't, you can anticipate this. When there are a couple of times leading up to the operation, and then after it, in the first week, there were 2 evenings when I was convinced she was going to die. And she, as much as said that to me, although she was not very communicative because of the extension of recovery. And next door, the man did die. And there's like a paroxysm that seizes you that is not of your own volition. It's kind of autonomic somehow. And if you have that feeling, then you know that there's nothing you can do about it. That is, that you're so tied to another person in their difficult circumstance that you don't have any alternative but to do whatever it is that you can do. And so we went through that. And when Jimmy Carter is speaking those words today, you know he did. And for those of us who live in anticipation or a long life, know that this is a question, if you're going to pair up with anyone and care for one another, that this is going to happen to you. Now, it's interesting when you look at others, you know, and I was thinking of a senator, but I don't know that there's a value in mentioning people who fail this because it's not an easy test, and no one can walk in the shoes of another when it comes to something as intimate and personal as the relationship with another. But there are those who've walked away from these situations, and in general conversations, people have disclosed things to me in the last year or so in which they were in this situation. How did they deal with it? So Holly and I were on a romp. We went down to Richmond because we wanted to break up our isolation in our own home. And we were originally going to go away to the beach for a couple of days. But Richmond is the Mecca of Virginians, so we had to go there. And we had been at this hotel once before, but we had not stayed in the room that was dedicated to Poe. And so we got a chance to do that. And to remember the words, who's that knocking at my door? Quoth the raven, nevermore. And there are lots of sketches and things around, but it brings you back to it. And we went to a museum, and maybe I'll do a couple of pictures from that. And I talked to a fellow who first got interested in Poe when he was 5 years of age, and he runs the Poe Center in Richmond. So we had all of that. And so it also isolates us for the last couple of days from 2 stories that continue to be updated on a daily basis. One, of course, is the Middle East, and the question whether that promise will be toward creeping or leaping toward peace, or fall back to what it's been, which is an abusive and hateful relationship between 2 strong parties that can't get past, understandably perhaps, but necessarily a weakness, get past the hate and distrust they have for each other, which seems to be well earned in both directions, and find a way to creep toward peace. And there are so many that don't believe it's possible. I don't know who we can believe who talks aloud about the chances. But continuing to release hostages, is a way to keep that going. It's interesting to think of Biden as president in this context, in which, because of his experience with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and his interest over the many years, and therefore not only does he have content rich, as I've said before, but he knows these people personally and he knows their flaws and the tragic past that he has to deal with but not speak to publicly, but understand in order to try to negotiate. And Netanyahu is not an easy party, nor are the leaders of Hamas. Luckily, there are both Arabs and Jews who want there to be a resolution, and that may help more than we can imagine, but we don't know that right now. I think of Trump knowing how he was in the White House and how badly he handled Ukraine. That is, just do a favor for me, help me investigate Biden, using our foreign policy as a way to propel his election against Biden by putting him down and knocking him down and doing what he could do. And in recent days, we've seen the argument about, hey, under Article 14, Section 3, you shouldn't be allowed to run for office because you took an oath, and that oath said that you were going to preserve, protect, and defend our Constitution. And Trump in recent days has been saying, I didn't promise that. I didn't promise to support the Constitution. And he thinks that the fact that the word support in the constitutional amendment bars one from looking at the fact that he did take an oath to preserve, protect, and defend our Constitution. But you see, the thing about Trump is that he lies so much about everything, and he pretends to be, in this case, I guess, I don't know, a Philadelphia lawyer or a smart-ass kid in Queens, to try to circumnavigate what should have been a spot-on decision, which is, fella, you can't run for president. You can't have it both ways. And it also diminishes the argument that your campaign is a real one and that it's for anything else but for you to become president again, to take care of the federal cases and to buy yourself time to deal with these state cases, meaning to avoid conviction, to avoid judgments to take away your businesses. And that's his game. And some people say, does he understand this? Does he understand that? Yes, he understands it. But you see, what he's doing is he's running through the grocery market, shouting things because he doesn't care if he's convicted or not in an absolute sense. He is only concerned to be campaigning for office so much, so long, that he has credibility if elected by navigating his way through a crowded set of candidates, independents, and the party candidates, including him as he sees it, that then allows him to get in the White House and to clean this mess up. So delay is his game, and delay is his game in order to be a full-fledged dictator who does what he says he's going to do if he's elected. And he feels there's enough people in America that he could win a plurality election, meaning less than a majority. And we have seen them in history. So I think it's an interesting thing to think about. Today we have, on the one hand, a president who in some respects was better as a former president than as a president. I believe that, and that's why I supported Ted Kennedy in a primary against Jimmy Carter. And I have met Carter, not in a setting that allowed us to say we have any acquaintances at all, but I met him at Democratic conventions where I was a delegate for one candidate or another. And he was there, and he was there with his wife, Rosalind. And so to see him from that day to this, and to compare him as a president with a guy like Trump, no comparison. And America deserves better. They deserve a man who may not succeed, but genuinely has his heart and his soul and his mind in the right place to preserve, protect, and defend our Constitution. This is a man, Trump, with no rules, who cares nothing about any outcome that isn't in his personal best interest to self-aggrandize power, sex, business, money, associations. And he's heading into the darkness of older age. And it's not beyond any of us to say, how can you possibly talk against Biden when we see what you do with your age now, only a few years younger than Biden. Whereas Biden, if you didn't know better, you'd say probably in his 60s or so, because being even a candidate is such a demanding thing. When I was running for Congress, much younger, I think I was 38 at the time, we had these meetings, and one of the congressmen who wanted to be speaker addressed us, and he said, "It's so much more like sport. It's so much more physical than people understand. So you're like an athlete in a suit going from place to place to place." Biden is doing that, plus going from nation state to nation state to nation state to try to find peace, meeting with cabinet officers, working not just this issue, but a number of issues, and dealing with a recalcitrant Congress that doesn't function at all because the Republicans hold their breath and won't do what they took an oath to do themselves. So we're back in Northern Virginia, and this weekend I have to go down to Norfolk in my role as an elected member, re-elected member of the Soil and Water Conservation District in Northern Virginia, and I'm also an area president of 6 counties in Virginia, and so I have meetings involving that. And all of it is directed toward one of the things I care a great deal about, as you know, which is how about some rich soil, clean water, and a handsome supply of it, so that we're not desperate and writing another terrible story. What I'd like to do, and what I see is where America should be going, is putting this crap behind us and turning toward a golden age again. And that golden age is a new age. It's not looking back on an old age. It is encouraging a culture. It is taking care of our own, young and old, healthy and ill, and mental health. It's about safety that doesn't allow someone to come into a room and make an argument by shooting you in the head with an AR-15. So my vision of America is not to be standing for anything that was, because what was imperfect, and Trump has made it worse. And we have a lot of work to do to go forward. And I think we can do that. And I see signs of it, even as I see these negative signs that I talk about. And those of you who wrote Holly and thanked her for her birthday and cheered her on, she was great. And she loved these stand-in persons who would talk to her, dance with her. She hadn't seen enough of that. I haven't seen him in a while myself. And so we had a good time. Thanks for your words. And I have to admit that us going down on our own family mission for the last couple of days has been a good retreat for us from all the stuff we do at our little farm, Ithaca Manor, and what I do representing the abused and misunderstood in cases. So nice to visit with you. I'll put a couple of pictures up with this, and I'm glad I can catch up with you, even if it's standing in the warmth of my home office. All the best. Bye-bye.